Welcome to the program. I'm your host, Anil Bami, and today we're stepping into a chapter of history that is as profound as it is painful. History often remembers 1971 as a year of geopolitical shifts and the birth of a new nation. But beneath the maps and the treaties lies a harrowing human reality that remains largely unrecognized on the global stage. The systematic targeting and genocide of the Hindu community during Operation Searchlight and the months that followed. For over 5 decades, survivors have carried the weight of a silenced history. One of destroyed temples, uprooted families, and a targeted erasure of an entire community from the soil of East Bengal. Today we ask, why has the world been so slow to name this tragedy? And what does it mean for the future of Indic heritage when such a massive scar remains unhealed? Joining me to navigate these complex waters are two extraordinary guests. First is Mondeepa Bose, a distinguished research scholar and author whose work breathes life into the ancient history and iconography of the subcontinent. She brings a vital lens to how the physical soul of a community, its temples and sacred spaces, was targeted during the violence. And second, we have Chris Blackburn, a renowned investigative journalist and a dedicated advocate for the international recognition of the 1971 genocide. Chris has spent years documenting the systemic nature of these atrocities and challenging the global silence that has persisted for 55 years. Mondeepa, Chris, thank you both for being here. Mondeepa, I would like to start with you. You study the deep history of Indic temples. How did the Pakistan Army view these structures during Operation Searchlight? Was the destruction of the Ramnakali Mandir a strategic move, or do you think it was a symbolic one?
Um, the Pakistan Army in the 1971 war. Hindu temples are places of worship for kafirs for the Muslims. This is something basic thing which you need to understand before we go into how they view it. Right at the beginning, it's a place for the kafirs, which they are supposed to destroy. They're not supposed to let them be around when they are in majority. Pakistan army is going to view the Hindu temple as the places of worship for a kafir and to be destroyed. This is what is written in the book. If anybody reads the Quran, it's there. So
Mm,
obviously they saw it in that way, and besides that, the political angle is also there that they have always taken a stand against India, right from the time they were born, 1947. They have always taken a stand against India, which is Hindu majority. So whatever move the Pakistan army has taken has been more of, I will say it has been more of religious colored. So they view the Hindu temples as kafir monuments to be destroyed. Even in the temples in Pakistan, they are
mhm,
being misused. I have seen terrible videos where they are now been turned into shops, chicken shops, or
mm,
garbage dumps. So this is how they treat temples. So that is exactly how they treated the temples in Bangladesh also. Whenever they're coming to when the topic is of Hindu temple, it is going to be seen as the kafir worship place. So it's something which should be destroyed. This is how they viewed it.
wow.
Ramana Kali temple massacre was a horrible thing, and the way they killed it, and then after setting on fire, shooting those people, locking them inside and shooting them. So, killing Kafirs, destroying the monuments as a sign of Islamic triumph. Politics comes later when the Islamic army is conquering a place and wanting to destroy the natives who don't
Mm,
follow their religion. Then politics comes later. It is always the religion that comes first.
yeah. Do you think it's almost on a personal basis as well with them?
It's a personal basis, yes, because hatred for India, hatred for Hindu majority India. So the anger, if you read some of the comments made by those Pakistan army generals at that time and the Maulavis who were instigating the people, you will find the hatred is very deep rooted because the hatred comes from the fact that these people were later converts, and when you see the people, there are still people around you following the religion of your ancestors, and you are the one who have been converted. I guess that sort of insecurity is also there, which stems this hatred and the need to prove themselves as more Muslims. Sometimes they go to the length where we say that they are being more Muslims than the Arab Muslims are. So a lot of insecurities are there because Hindus are still around, and so they know that our ancestral religions, people who followed ancestral religion, are still around. We could not turn this country into an Islamic majority. That sense is there very strongly there.
Yeah,
So all these things come into play, and so it's a very personal hatred that the subcontinent Muslims have for the Hindus over here.
sure. And hopefully Hindus will be around for a lot longer as well.
Let's hope
Chris,
so. I really
yeah,
sincerely hope so.
you've been a vocal advocate for the international recognition of the 1971 genocide. Why do you believe that the world, specifically the UN and the US, has been so slow to label this as a Hindu genocide?
Well,
The 1971 war was entirely US backed. US backed, UK backed. So obviously they will not recognize it. They will not recognize a Hindu genocide. Hindu genocide is the biggest form of genocide that has happened in this world, and the figures are like skyrocketing. And it's unfortunate that we Hindus still haven't. We have just started demanding for a Hindu genocide day, much based on the Holocaust day for the Jews. Hindus should have done that much earlier because the amount of killings that the Hindus have faced, it's beyond. I don't think any other community has faced this much of the last. I think our invasion started in 8th century from the Sindh. I'm talking right from the Pakistan to the Sindh area when the first Muslim invader, as invaders, they came in as traders, but as invaders they entered from the Sindh area, Pakistan, which is now Pakistan. So from that time, 8th century onwards, still it's still ongoing, and we are facing you horrific rapes, horrific conversions, killings. We have seen Deepu Das killing recently, how horribly
Yeah,
he was killed.
yeah.
So this is going. This is nothing new. This is going on. If anybody says that what was happening in Bangladesh is political and new, no, it is not. This is going on from the time which the invasion started, and Hindu genocide day should be a day which should be declared as a Hindu genocide day, so that it should be a remembrance day for these people who have lost only because of the religion. And
Mhm.
US, UK, I don't expect them to recognize it because they have backed it all along. So I don't expect them. It is us we have to fight, and it is our government who has to start with this. It is no use asking US, UK for help.
Hmm. Yeah, very well said. Chris, as I said, you've been a vocal advocate for the international recognition of the 71 genocide. In your opinion, what do you think um, about the world and specifically, as Mandeepa said, the UN and the US and the situation with them not recognizing it?
I think it's quite an easy but a complicated question and answer. I think if you look back at the time, I think Pakistan used its sort of strategic leverage. Obviously, as it was actually committing the atrocities, it used its strategic leverage to keep the US and others away from the problem. We know that because of the blood telegram, where basically US diplomats in East Pakistan, Archer K. Blood basically said this is a genocide against Hindus. What are you going to do about it? We know at the time that obviously Kissinger and Nixon, President Nixon, were trying to get China on board, and they knew that they needed Pakistan for that effort. So there was a lot of the Cold War realities at the time, provided strategic sort of protection for Pakistan. But then in the aftermath of the sort of the 50 years that have taken place, and we know I started with the genocide issue in 2003. So that's nearly like over 20 years ago. And then at the time, the reason that we didn't want to go after Pakistan and make them accountable for what they did in 1971 and was because of the global war on terrorism. So we've had the Cold War and then we've had the global war on terrorism, which many could probably suggest is a hangover of the Cold War policies of weaponizing religion, especially in the Islamic world. So the global war on terrorism was a hangover from the Cold War. So I think Pakistan has been sort of protected on that level because of that. But when you look back in history, and people who like me who know the history of sort of the Indian subcontinent and the horrors of partition, and we're the United Nations, the World Bank, and other major sort of um, global and international organizations knew exactly what was happening in 1971. It wasn't brushed under the carpet. We know that the World Bank under Robert McNamara did a massive report as the genocide was taking place. That report got made classified because the Americans didn't want it getting leaked out what Pakistan was doing. So it was on multiple fronts. We knew there was an effort to suppress and to protect Pakistan as it was committing basically crimes against humanity. So I think we've got the Cold War, we've got the global war on terrorism. But I think what we've seen is because of sort of Pakistani behavior, but just people not knowing about the region who want to learn about the region, we're seeing that this is an issue that is still massive, whether it's in Bangladeshi politics, Pakistani politics, or Indian politics. The 1971 issue for many in the region is it's a case of black and white. People want justice. Hindus want justice. Bengalis want justice because Pakistani's behavior hasn't been modified. There hasn't been accountability. And what many activists are saying is, listen, the errors that were made in 1971, the lessons haven't been learned by Pakistan. It's making the same mistakes in Balochistan, in Sindh, in Punjab, wherever. It is making the same mistakes that it made in 1971. So why isn't the world community that was sort of this United Nations system that was born after the Second World War and because of the horrors of the Holocaust that happened in Europe. That we all know the "Never Again" slogan, but never again happened in 1971. There was a Hindu genocide. There was a Bengali genocide. We knew that Pakistan, the West Pakistan, wanted to dilute the Hindu influence that it saw on Bengali culture. And that meant killing Muslims as well as Hindus. We know obviously the Hindu community, the majority, they were the ones who were the most targeted. But it stretched way beyond that. It was a cultural jihad, a genocide. And I think that now that the international community has been sort of forced to relook at that, they've got no excuses, and I think it does it shames the West, it shames the United Nations, and there are other factors that play into this, and I think the United Nations has used sort of the nations and the peacekeepers from India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. It's needed those peacekeepers, and I think that's partly a reason why the United Nations doesn't like to sort of point the finger at Pakistan, is because it's and this is one of the areas I think yes, we all criticize Pakistan for supporting sort of mass casualty terrorism like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed and all these other groups. But ultimately, when it comes to the United Nations, Pakistan actually does a fantastic thing for humanity, and the rest of sort of the Indian subcontinent do too. Like without Indian, without Bangladeshi and Pakistani peacekeepers, the United Nations would be an organization that's literally allowing some of the worst atrocities to re-happen. So it's sort
Yeah.
of a perverse sort of thing where the UN protects Pakistan because it committed a genocide in 1971, and lots of scholars now believe it did. And at the time, international reportage, it wasn't a secret. And we had like the Sunday Times in the United Kingdom had on it massive headlines: Pakistan is committing genocide, a Hindu genocide.
Mm.
So to say that it's sort of it's yes, I think it's the initial sort of horrors at the time got diluted. But I think nobody who knows about these things believes that there's been real accountability. And I think that's bad for the region and it's bad for the rest of the world. And I think it is shameful.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. Some fantastic insights there, Chris. Thank you for that. Mandeepa, in your research on the links between Bengal and other regions, how central do you think the Hindu identity to the local culture before 71, and how much of that physical heritage has been lost forever?
The Hindu identity is very much central over there, and the see if we go back, looking at Bengal history, it's a very complex history. We need to go back a lot, and then if we go back to the first Bengal partition, which happened in 1905, which was later taken back, but again the main reason for it was the religion. The Hindus were in charge of everything. They were controlling. They were the zamindars, so they were in controlling the financial everything. It was in the power, and the Muslims did not like it. The main problem was that when the British came in and started with the education, the Indian Muslims refused to take up English as a subject. They said, no, these people have removed our Mughal Empire, which is the Muslim rule, and they installed their own Christian kingdom. So we will not take anything from them. So they refused English education. The Hindus started with the English studies, and they took over everything. Bengali meant Hindu culture basically at that point. Which the Muslims did not like. So the ones in power in Bangladesh always had a lot more Muslims than the West Bengal part. And they started advocating for partition based on religion, because the Hindus were the Bengali identity was entirely Hindu identity, and we are not liking it, so we want to separate. And the British is obviously going by the divide and rule policy, supported the thing, and that is how the 1905 partition first happened. And it was the British said we are doing it for administration. It was not exactly for administration. The Muslims really wanted it. And so it happened. But then the Hindus were in majority, and they said, no, we don't want it. So again, it was brought back, and which the Muslims did not like. So they took, in 1946, when the Muslim League strongly went for it, they made sure that the coming back doesn't happen. The violence and everything was so horrible that this time the cutoff was permanent. There was no coming back. 1905, there was a comeback. This time there is no comeback. And the Hindu in Bengali, the main identity, the core is the Hinduness. The Hindu thing is the main identity of a Bengali. And this has started from ancient times. Language was already developed by the time the Sena dynasty was ruling. By the end of it, what we speak now, the language that we know as Bengali, was under the Sena dynasty. It was completed. This fake leftists that they have come out with the theory that the Muslim invaders came in, and then the Bengali language then formed after. The Bengali identity formed only after the Islamic invasion happened is totally wrong. The language was totally formed by when the Sena dynasty was ruling. So our culture and everything is very Hindu. In Bengali identity is a very Hindu identity, and that is why when the invaders came in, they couldn't destroy this Hindu identity. So what they did is they started mixing up the foreign, the Persian, the Arabic, the Turkish things into our language, so as to dilute the Sanskrit root. This has happened in Bengal. So they tried it that way. Then they lots of other ways they tried to dilute the Hindu identity of the Bengali culture, which they couldn't. It's a very things in North India. What happened once the invaders came and took over? They stopped building temples. You will not find any medieval era temples in the North Indian because it was flattened. They could not rebuild it. In Bengal, this did not happen. After 200 or 300 years of silence, when they were destroying, then the Bengali Hindu identity came out. Then they started building this terracotta Hindu temple that we see is a real second phase. This is the first phase. We have the Pala Sena temples, very little are remaining because the Muslim invaders destroyed them. So the entire temple architecture was changed, but the Bengalis did not stop building temples. The Hindu identity in Bengalis are so strong. When the other North Indian people had stopped building temples, they got broken down and they stopped building temples. Bengalis didn't. We have beautiful medieval era terracotta temples built by local rulers, zamindars, local rajas, or local kings. They kept on building. So this identity is very strong. Then we had that second Hindu Renaissance under Mahaprabhu Chaitanya, who brought back that he was the one who said that this Varna system which we had, which is now known as the caste system, at that time he said is so dividing us. So I am my Hinduism, my Vaishnavism will be open for all. So he brought together everyone, all the castes came together, and there was a huge level Hindu Renaissance under Mahaprabhu Chaitanya. That is when Sri Krishna worship. Before that, we had Rama worship. Bengal had a lot of Sri Ram worship. After Mahaprabhu Chaitanya, the Vaishnavism shifted to Krishna. So it's entirely Bengali identity is Hindu identity entirely. Even if uh, before this recent Saudi started in the 90s when they wanted to Arabize the Indian Muslims basically. Then they started with this hijab wearing and nikah. This was Bengali Muslims not where they used to dress up like the Hindu Bengalis, wearing sindoor, wearing shakapola, wearing saris. They used to do this. This is because the Hindu culture, core culture, is so strong within the Bengalis that was the identity. That the Hindu-ness is very strong, still very strong. If you move out of Calcutta, the urban pockets, and if you move out to the rural, it is still very strong. And unfortunately for India, after post 1947, a lot of political what to say, to taking revenge and all this. Nehru hated Bengal because he faced a lot of troubles from Bengali nationalist leaders like Netaji, S.V. Mukherjee. He hated them and they were not following what he wanted to say. And they were, S.V. Mukherjee especially wanted Kashmir in, which Nehru did not. There was a lot of political tussle and he hated Bengali. So he did a lot of harm to the Bengal industry, financial, economic thing. Then, unfortunately for Bengal, this 1971 happened. I'm talking about West Bengal now. And a lot of refugees came in at that time. And India and West Bengal especially could not handle so many refugees. The situation was horrible. And the refugees were kept in a very bad state. And then the left took advantage of this situation and they came to power. Bengal went into a horrible state. We all know what the communists did to West Bengal. No industry, nothing, no job. TMC is still continuing with that. And at that time, you know what happened? Under Congress, still there was some archaeological work going on in West Bengal. West Bengal is a state which sits on treasure trove of heritage. We have this DP, which mounds, basically archaeological mounds. Those go back to prehistoric era. But there is no one to dig it because the left government doesn't want the Hindu history, pre-Islamic history to come out. TMC government is not at all interested in it because they are bringing in Bangladeshi Muslims basically and settling them for votes. So nobody's interested in the pre-Islamic era history. Nobody's doing any work. So there's a massive destruction of Hindu pre-Islamic, let's say pre-Islamic era history destruction in West Bengal. Even the medieval era terracotta temples just lying. There's nobody to work on it. And the state government recently took up some conservation work, but they don't know. Really, TMC government doesn't know how to do it. So they're painting priceless terracotta temple plaques. Those they need to be conserved in a different way. They're just painting it over. So many plaques are being painted over. They're getting destroyed. Plaques are being stolen. So much of there's a strong smuggling, artifact smuggling racket going on from Bangladesh, which has branches in West Bengal. So Hindu heritage in West Bengal is in shatters, really.
Wow. Wow. You know, I feel privileged having both of you on today. You have such a knowledge of what happened back then, and you have so much information to share with the world. So thank you for that. Chris, from your work in counterterrorism now and history, what was the role of the local militias in identifying Hindu households for the military? How systemic do you think that that was?
Well, it was wide. It was we know that the peace committees were set up in April. I, So obviously, in March, the end of March was when Operation Searchlight, March 25th, which is it's coming up in a couple of days. So that was the start of the Pakistani campaign, and then within a couple of days, within weeks or so, they tried to get the Jamaat-e-Islami, which is the Maududi supporters. They were working hand in glove with the Pakistani army to go after Hindus. We know that from the Bangladeshi war crimes tribunals. We know that from newspaper reports at the time. So what these Jamaat-e-Islami did, they set up sort of the Al-Badr militias, which was the moon, and then the Al-Shams, the sun militias. So these two groups, Al Badr and Al Shams, were the main sort of intelligence and actual sort of they was the boot boys working on the ground to round up sort of people and intellectuals and others. And these groups were also used to go after Hindus. So I think what has come out in the sort of the war crimes tribunals is this was systematic. It was a real campaign to not only to neutralize the independence movement, but to go and to cleanse Hindus. And I think that was one of the main things that came out of the International Crimes Tribunals under Sheikh Hasina. Is that the Jamaat-e-Islami worked hand in glove, and we know not just after sort of 1971, we know Jamaat-e-Islami, especially in Pakistan, has been used to sort of launch the Kashmir Jihad, Hizbul Mujahideen, and other groups. Jamaat-e-Islami was the sort of the this was subcontracted by the Pakistani intelligence agencies, like they were in 1971, to run camps, to run they were until the Taliban kicked them out. They were running camps in Afghanistan, with sort of Madudi followers there. So the Jamaat-e-Islami as an organization, it is not only is it genocidal, it has been involved in terrorism since 1971 in the region. So when my work was obviously focused after 9/11 was looking at the charities that sort of support Al Qaeda around the world, and a lot of times it was Jamaat-e-Islami from sort of the Indian subcontinent that was getting involved in Indonesia and other places in Africa. So it was Jamaat-e-Islami charities that were involved in this effort. Whether or not the Pakistan ISI was in complete control of that effort, we don't know. But we do know, and it's been well documented, even by um, Hussein Haqqani, who was the former Pakistani ambassador to the United States. He's a major scholar on the the sort of strategy that the Pakistan and its intelligence agencies and security apparatus have had. He wrote a book and basically said, yes, all these efforts were subcontracted to the ISI. And so Jamaat-e-Islami is a genocidal movement, is a group that's once sort of uh, resurgence of Islamic supremacy and is involved in terrorism. So the Jamaat-e-Islami is an organization. It isn't just a political party that's involved in elections, because yes, it does get involved. It's not like the sort of the Taliban and others who are hardcore against democracy. It has to sort of live within democratic systems. But we do know it's had this sort of extracurricular activities which have been widely documented since the sort of the 1970s, where Jamaat-e-Islami gets involved in foreign jihad, and gets involved in Al Qaeda. It was the group that sort of provided safe haven for Osama bin Laden. There's still sort of reports that the Abbottabad raid against Osama bin Laden, that local taxi drivers in Abbottabad called it Hizbul Mujahideen House because of the Jamaat-e-Islami connections to the area. So we've have all these different competing narratives about Jamaat as its role as a democratic organization, but we also have its role within genocide and terrorism. So I think the world is doing a disservice to not only Pakistan but to themselves, because we know that these Jamaat-e-Islami charities have a stretch around the world, and I don't think there's been a real massive movement to tackle it. In the United States, we see them all talking about banning the Muslim Brotherhood, which actually has quite a lot, like, well, doesn't have a lot of evidence to suggest it is working with terrorism, when in Jamaat-e-Islami's sort of example, we see that Jamaat-e-Islami in Pakistan is being active in promoting Hamas. It's given millions to Hamas over the years to launch its jihad against Israel. And we have seen it in other places like Indonesia, where Jamaat's been caught funneling money barley bombers. So that's well documented. But the Americans and sort of the Middle East are focused on the Muslim Brotherhood, when in reality they should maybe be more looking at the Jamaat-e-Islami as a movement and its relationship with Pakistani intelligence services.
Wow. Wow. Mandeepa, what do you think? Many describe 1971 as a political war, but for the Hindu community, it felt civilizational. How do you see the intersection of faith and identity in the violence of that year?
1971 war was not a political war. I'll tell you what happened. This Bhasha Andolan, this language war, it was given the face of a language war. Let me go back a little bit. In the 1947, before the partition, um, this language, Bengali language identities was not there among the Muslims. And they were very happily Arabicizing, they were using Arabic words, Turkish words, then they had no problems. The problem started after independence when they started realizing Pakistan was favoring the Urdu speaking Muslims. Urdu speaking Muslim meaning the Muslims who lived in Bihar, Indian Bihar, which is now the Bihar state. A lot of Bihari Muslims were then staying in Bangladesh, that was East Pakistan then. And this Bengali speaking, they don't, if you listen to the West Bengal Bengali speaking, and if you listen to the Bangladeshi Muslim speaking, you will find there's a difference. It is not the same language because they use a lot of Arabic, Persian, Turkish, foreign words. Let us just say foreign words. The Bengali Hindus in West Bengal, the language that they speak is a Sanskrit rooted original Bengali. So at that time, when 1947 partition happened because of religion. Let us not fool ourselves or anybody that it was any other kind of move. It was based on religion. And when the East Pakistan happened, they were very happily mixing the words to cut off the Sanskrit origin of the Bengali language. They were happily doing it, but in the 60s and 70s, they realized that Pakistan is forcing in the Urdu language as the official language, and we are going to lose the jobs. We are going to lose everything if the Urdu speaking Muslims take over, which means the Pakistani Muslims and the Bihari Muslims will take over. It is at that time the leaders, some of the Maulanas who had headed this, who are supposed to be the Mukti Jodhas, leading Mukti Jodhas, they at that time they came up with this ideas that we need the common people support. We need for the street fighting to get down on the streets and start fighting. We need the common man. So let us start instigate the people using something which will create a movement. So they started with this Bhasha Andolan, that Bengali language identity. Suddenly they realized how much they loved Bengali language. And it was for East Pakistan, the Bengali demand for Bengali language, with its as it was spoken with the Sanskrit base, was first started by the Hindus. And so originally Hindus also took part, but later the common people came in and movement happened. Bhasha Andolan took place. A lot of mass hysteria was created through a lot of poems, everything, but everything was orchestrated mostly, which was later realized. I have read articles by Muslims themselves. They've said that it was genuinely orchestrated, and because they wanted to separate out, religion was never religion was never they were never fighting over religion. Pakistan, both the Pakistans had one thing, that we want a Muslim identity. What they were fighting was who wants to control the financial institutions and everything. And that is when this Muslims in Bangladesh realized that the Urdu speaking Muslims take peace. We will not. We had removed Bengali Hindus who were the zamindars, who were in power, and we took over. Now again, there's a crisis, and the Urdu speaking Muslims are taking over. So now we have to create a mass hysteria. So Bhasha Andolan was created. India and Hindus were targeted. That was a Hindu genocide. They mostly Hindus were killed, and that is how they got 1971 war. They got their freedom. But Hindus were never treated. If it was really about the Bhasha Andolan, which they say language movement, they would have treated Hindus properly. They did not. The Muslims, Bangladeshi Hindus the population has gone down so badly. That is the reason, because they were persecuted. They are persecuted. Women are daily. I get news of women being picked up. So many women are missing. They have been converted. Later, it was found that they have been converted. They target women. That is a womb jihad, which we call it as womb jihad, because if you target women, you pick them up and one less women convert them to Muslim, less Hindus will be produced, so more Muslims. That is known as womb jihad. When you take away the womb from the reproductive thing is gone, so less children. This is how they think. They target women, and 1971, some of the descriptions are horrible. A child has seen his sister being dragged away. She was praying. They were having puja in the house. They were praying, and she was still carrying the conch shell in her hand. She was being dragged away by the Muslim men. The conch shell. They have children have seen such scenes, and these are recorded. I'm not making up anything. These are all recorded, documented facts. So politics, in a way, you can say that this Bengali-speaking Muslims wanted power, wanted control over the Urdu-speaking Muslims. So politics, in a way, yes. And then the easy target has always been the Hindus. India, the Bhasha Andolan was also a way to get India involved. India had to get involved because the way Pakistan army started killing Hindus, they had to get involved at the end. And so it was politics, yes, because partly yes, because they wanted power over. They wanted the Urdu-speaking Muslims to move out, and Bengali speaking Muslims wanted full control. Hindus never mattered basically in Bangladesh,
Mm.
Pakistan, east or west. Hindus never mattered. They were just always been used, like during the partition war, Namasudras, Dalit Hindus remained back. They were allies with the Muslim League, and they did not take part in the freedom movement because they were allying with the Muslim League. What happened? Dalits were killed. Namasudra Dalits, these are Hindus, they were killed by the Muslims once the partition took place. So Hindus were like toys for them. Use them, and then when the things are settled down, start killing again.
Uh, I mean, we talk about these things and they sound so horrendous, but the people who actually had to live them, we can't imagine the kind of pain and suffering that they've been
I really
through.
can't imagine what the women went through. I mean, I've
No.
read how they were gang raped and how they were picked. I can't imagine. No, it's a horrifying thing to even read, go through them.
Yeah, yeah. And it's all about power, really, isn't it? It's about power. It's not about the sex, it's about the power. How much power they have over the Hindus, how we can show that we can do anything. That's how strong we are as a nation, as a cause, an identity. Chris, we're now over 50 years since that war. What are the geopolitical consequences of letting these specific atrocities remain unofficial in the eyes of major global powers?
Well, I think it's had a sort of a caustic effect on just how people in Bangladesh and India and Pakistan see the international community, that they see us as hypocrites, and that the West doesn't care, it's selective on human rights. So on that issue alone, it's bad. But then for Indian Hindus, I think for the international community, and especially the United Nations family, to have been aware of the systematic rapes and the genocide, and it was you can't forget it was the United Nations that actually got Dr. Jeffrey Davis from the International Planned Parenthood organization to perform the late stage abortions in Bangladesh. Like, and we're talking like he believed he believed that the numbers of 2,000 to 4,000 rapes, right, were conservative figures. He believed there were much more, and he was training people to go out and like basically to have these abortion clinics, and they were basically sometimes like back streets. And for him to say that, and for the United Nations to know all about it, and as I've said, the World Bank did a massive study as the genocide was ongoing, and they basically said villages and whole towns and cities, it was like Hiroshima, it was like a nuclear bomb had gone off, and the basic target and the target that the Pakistanis wanted to go after and their auxiliaries in Jamaat Islami were the Hindus. And they went after the Muslim Bengalis because they were seen as being two Hindus. So for this to be a sort of a festering wound on the sort of international consciousness, I think it is a we just need to rip the band-aid off. There needs to be accountability because when we saw the Russian invasion of Ukraine, right? The West criticized India's response, and India basically fired back. Well, in 1971, the Russians came to the aid of humanity, and that's what happened. And I think it has a caustic effect on global policy and international institutions when we see that the United Nations at times has turned a blind eye. And I think but for them, everybody's in a difficult situation. But when it's so stark, and we have the documents, we know what even Pakistani sort of generals said about their own sort of. We've had accounts over the last sort of 20 years where we've got biographies now of Pakistani generals who are saying we were ordered to basically dilute the Hindus in Bangladesh. So we know there was genocidal intent. And we know that there's now scholars from the sort of the genocide studies who now are looking more at Bangladesh, like the Lemkin Institute and other sort of judicially organizations, are saying yes, there was a genocide, but what is the actual international community doing about it, like to address this massive historical mistake?
Mm.
Not a lot, but they are sort of shoots of hope. I think we've seen resolutions in the US Congress where this 1971, the Hindu genocide and the Bengali genocide are being mentioned. And I hope that for the good of humanity, not just the victims, but for the good of humanity, that we address these historical sort of failures. And it is a failure by everyone. Um, I think we can't look ourselves in the mirror and say we did the right thing in 1971 because we didn't. And I think the Americans especially, I mean, the British were sat on the fence in numerous ways. Yes, we did go with the sort of the US fleet that was sent to the Bay of Bengal, but the Americans hate talking about 1971 because this is a time when they got caught basically aiding a genocide, and it's caustic to to humanity, and I hope it gets addressed. And I mentioned the sort of the shoots of hope. These resolutions need to be in European capitals as well, because for us to have a good relationship with India and the rest of the world, we've got to start looking at ourselves like we can't make these mistakes again. We can't let states that get away with genocide, mass casualty terrorism, we can't let these nations get away with it. And there has to be some, yes, I know in the West we get accused of being hypocrites. And I think the Canadian sort of Prime Minister, when he said recently at Davos that we do play fast and loose with human rights, that the international order doesn't sort of stretch to everyone else. We're selective, and I think that needs to change. And I think
Mm.
if we address the issue of 1971 and the Hindu genocide, I think that could be a major step for helping humanity and helping reset ties, because the world going forward can't deal with what has happened.
Yeah, 100%. Um, we haven't got too long left now. What I would like to do is just ask you both something. If there is one thing that you want a student of history to remember about 1971, 100 years from now, what would it be? Either of you can start.
For a student of history, I'd like them to remember, since I'm a woman myself, I would like them to remember what women went through, what the Hindu women went through.
Mm.
I would really like them. I have read books where people have tried to whitewash it. They have argued from the number of women being raped, saying no, not 1,50,000. I'm just giving an example, but this is not how you should. You're documenting the horrors of a
Mm.
genocide. So I want proper history as it happened. I want the history students to remember what Hindu women went through in 1971. It was horrific, and I want them to read what had actually happened. There are few books that have documented that, and I want the world to remember those women.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. They should be remembered. Chris?
Yeah, I think the sort of the same sort of issues, but I want in 100 years' time, I think what we're seeing now in our sort of lifetime is the world is getting more dangerous. And things that happened in 1971 could easily be happen again. They can be repeated, and they have been. And I think that's what we need to all focus on. Never again is become an empty slogan. And I think in 100 years' time, I would like to think that 1971 and the issue of 1971 was where actually East and West came together to say, no, we can't say never again as an empty slogan. It's got to be the thing that unites us all as humanity. Doesn't matter whether you're Hindu, Jew, Muslim, whatever, is that for humanity's sake that we don't repeat the same mistakes. So I hope in 100 years' time that when students are talking about 1971, is this was the start of a real sort of, yes, we had the Cold War after World War II, and there was all the horrors that came with World War II. The Cold War had some pretty horrific things, and I do think 1971 gets lumped in with that, and it does dilute the sort of the Hindu genocide parts of that. But I think for a student in 100 years' time, I would like to think that 1971 is where we try to really make never again an actual promise to humanity because we are failing ourselves as humanitarians, as members of the human race. I think for us to move forward, we have to address it. And 1971, I think, is a place where we should start because sometimes some of the horrific things that happened, especially against women, were stark and they're well documented, and we can't repeat that ever again.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. On this topic, I think we can probably go on for hours and hours and hours because there is so much to discuss. Um, so as we draw this conversation to a close now, one thing remains undeniably clear. The silence surrounding 1971 isn't just a failure of the past. It's a challenge for our present. Mondeepa, your insights into the physical and cultural erasure of Hindu heritage remind us that a genocide isn't just a loss of lives, it's an attempt to kill the very memory of a people. And Chris, your work on the global stage shows us that justice is a marathon and recognition is the first step towards ensuring that these horrors are never repeated. We're now over 5 decades removed from Operation Searchlight. But for the millions who were uprooted and for the families who never saw justice, the story is still being written. And it's up to us, researchers, journalists, and listeners, to keep these narratives alive, to document every temple lost and every story told until the world finally acknowledges the 1971 Hindu genocide for what it truly was. I want to thank Mondeepa Bose and Chris Blackburn for their tireless work and for joining us today to shed light on these forgotten shadows. And to you, our listeners, thank you for hearing and bearing witness. History is only forgotten if we stop talking about it. I'm Anil Bami, and this has been 55 years of genocide in Bangladesh, 1971. Live with passion until next time.